He didn't come on Tuesday. In 4 months, 16 Tuesdays in a row, Park Yi-sun had never missed. Not once. Not when it rained so hard the parking lot flooded. Not when the roads turned to ice. Not when I told him I needed space and he came anyway, sat in the armchair by the window, read his Murakami, and left without a word because showing up was his language and he never missed a sentence. So when 2 o'clock passed, then 2:30, then 3, and the armchair sat empty with afternoon sun falling across it like a spotlight on a stage with no actor, I knew. Something was wrong. Welcome back to the channel. If you haven't watched part 1 yet, go watch it first, link is in the description. If you're caught up, subscribe, hit that bell and settle in. Because this one almost broke me to tell. I called him at 3:15, straight to voicemail, called again at 3:20, same dead tone, 3:30, 3:45, 5 calls in 30 minutes, each one ringing into silence. By 4 o'clock, I was in my car. The drive to Whitfield Lane takes 11 minutes. I made it in 7. When I turned onto his road, the first thing I noticed was the gate. Not closed, not locked, swung wide open. And at a property with armed security and cameras on every corner, an open gate is a scream. No Mercedes in the driveway, no security vehicles, no men in dark clothing. Just the house, large, modern, silent, and the kind of stillness that belongs to a place people left in a hurry. I parked, got out. My legs were heavy, but I made them move. The front steps were limestone, clean, pale, expensive, and on the second step a smear, dark brown, dried, about the size of my palm. Blood. I tried the front door, unlocked, pushed it open. The foyer looked normal, shoes by the door, coat rack, the faint smell of cedar I'd come to associate with him. But past the foyer, things were wrong. A chair in the living room overturned, a lamp on the floor, shade crumpled, and on the kitchen counter his phone. Screen cracked, sitting next to a mug of tea that had gone stone cold. He'd been making tea. Someone came, and he didn't even have time to grab his phone. I stood in his kitchen and looked at that cold mug, and something shifted inside me. Not into fear, I'd made peace with fear a long time ago. Into something colder, clearer. The same thing I'd felt the night I found the Bridgeport warehouse. The thing that happens when I stop being a victim and start being the woman who acts. But before I called anyone, I walked through the house. Room by room, not looking for clues, the FBI would handle that. I was looking for him, the pieces of him that lived in rooms where nobody was watching. His study, bookshelves, Murakami, Dostoevsky, and Baldwin. My Baldwin, the one I'd recommended. He'd bought his own copy, dog-eared, annotated in Korean in the margins. He'd been really reading it. His bedroom, neat, sparse. A single photograph on the nightstand, not framed, just printed on paper, leaned against the lamp. A photo of the library, my library, taken from the parking lot on an autumn afternoon. Golden light, the returns desk visible through the window. He'd been looking at that photo every night before he slept. I picked it up, and something broke loose in my chest. The first time Yi-sun made me laugh, I covered my mouth like I'd done something dangerous. February. He was in his armchair and I was reshuffling the returns cart, and he said, deadpan, "I've read this book 3 times and I'm still not sure if Murakami is a genius or if I'm too stubborn to admit I don't understand it." I laughed, real, from somewhere unguarded. And the moment it escaped, I pressed my hand over my lips. He didn't smile, he did something worse. Looked at me with pure warmth and said, quietly, "There it is." Like he'd been waiting for that sound. The first time he touched my hair, March. I reached for a high shelf and a curl fell across my face, and he tucked it behind my ear without thinking. His fingers grazed my temple. We both froze. "Sorry, I shouldn't have." "It's okay." "Is it?" "Yeah, it's okay." The first time I wanted to kiss him, I was alone, Thursday night, lying in bed, thinking about the way his fingers turned pages, careful, deliberate, and wondering what they'd feel like against my skin. And instead of the sick shame spiral, I felt something quiet and radical. Want. I told Dr. Osei, braced for the pushback. She smiled. First time in 5 years. That's not pathology, Amara. That's healing. I set his photograph back, exactly where it had been. Then I called Ruiz. She answered fast. Amara, I was about to call you. He's gone. Gate open, blood on the steps, phone on the counter. We know. Surveillance lost contact at approximately 1 p.m. We've been monitoring intercepted communications from Seoul for 72 hours. The council issued a sanction. A sanction. A kill order. I gripped the counter. You knew a kill order was coming and you didn't warn him. Ruiz exhaled. We decoded the specific sanction 6 hours ago. We dispatched a protection team to his property immediately. They arrived at 1:40 p.m. Park was taken at approximately 1. The council's extraction team was already on U.S. soil before we cracked the communication. They moved faster than our intelligence. A pause. 40 minutes faster. 40 minutes. That's the margin his life hung on. 40 minutes between being home and being gone. We've been tracking encrypted signals pointing to the Stamford port area, Ruiz continued. That's the general zone, but we can't pinpoint the exact building, and we can't breach without a confirmed location. Tactical team is staged and ready. How long before you stand down? 12 hours, maybe less. I'll call you back. David was at the kitchen table. Cereal. He saw my face and the spoon stopped. I told him. Something shifted in his expression. The brother I used to know. I know some people, he said. You were a debtor, David, not an operative. Debtors hear things operatives don't. Nobody watches what they say around people they think don't matter. He looked at me. In Philadelphia, I worked construction with guys who drove trucks for Kwon's network. Low level, off the books. They talked because I was nobody to them. One mentioned a transit point near the Stamford port, a warehouse the Geomun-pa used before Yi-sun shut operations down. Mothballed 2 years. That's not an address. No, east side of the port district near the container yards. Blue corrugated roof. Rusted. That's everything I've got. A neighborhood, a roof color, not an address, a starting point. The FBI has the area but can't find the building. If I narrow it. You're not driving to Stamford to hunt a black site. Watch me. Then I'm coming. We drove mostly silent. David navigated on satellite view, Stamford Port District, scanning for blue roofs. 7 warehouses matched. 7 buildings, 12-hour window. One of them held the man I loved. We started east, driving slow, lights off where we could manage it. The port district at night was a maze, container yards stacked with rusting metal boxes, chain-link fences topped with razor wire, dead-end roads that smelled like diesel and salt water. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every parked van made my heart jump. First warehouse, abandoned. Weeds pushing through cracked pavement, windows broken, loading dock chained shut. Not it. Second, same. Dark. Dead. A cat startled out from under a dumpster, and I nearly hit the brakes hard enough to throw David into the dashboard. Third, abandoned. Roof was blue but half collapsed. Nobody had been inside in years. Fourth, active, legitimate. Trucks loading at a dock, workers in reflective vests, a foreman with a clipboard. Normal, safe, wrong. Fifth, dark, blue roof, rusted, correct profile. My pulse spiked. But no vehicles, no lights, no movement. I drove past slowly, checking every angle. Nothing. 2 left. My hands were sweating on the wheel. David hadn't spoken in 15 minutes. The clock on the dashboard said 9:47 p.m., less than 10 hours on Ruiz's window. If the last 2 buildings were empty, I had nothing. 6th. I turned the corner and saw it, and my foot came off the gas on its own. Blue corrugated roof, rusted edges, chain-link fence with razor wire, 2 black SUVs, tinted windows, no plates. 1 light in an upper window on the far side, not all of them, just one, which meant they were using a small section of a large building, trying to stay invisible. And near the entrance, the orange glow of a cigarette. A man, standing guard. That's it, David said. His voice was barely above a whisper even though we were 3 blocks away with the windows up. I pulled over between two shipping containers. Engine off, lights off. My heart was slamming so hard I could feel it in my wrists. I called Ruiz. Blue corrugated roof, east side of the port district, 200 meters south of Container Yard 7. 2 vehicles, no plates. Guard at the entrance. Upper window, far side. How did you? Your team is staged. I gave you the address. How fast? If satellite confirms, 40 minutes. Confirm it. David told me on the drive what the tattoos meant, why they needed Yi-sun alive. High-ranking Geomun-pa encode operational intelligence into their ink. Coordinates, account ciphers, access codes. It looks like art, but it's a map. And Yi-sun runs the American operation. His body carries the keys to everything. So they need him alive, until they've cataloged every mark. Then they don't. I thought about his hands. The tattoo on his index finger, remember what silence costs. The ink I'd traced with my eyes every Tuesday without knowing I was looking at the blueprint of an empire. 41 minutes. That's how long I sat in that car between two shipping containers, watching the access road, counting my own heartbeats. At minute 12, I started bargaining with the universe the way I had the night Yi-sun went to meet Seo. If he's alive. If he's alive, I'll tell him. I'll say the thing I haven't said. I'll stop building walls between us out of fear that someone might use him to hurt me again. At minute 23, David said, "They're coming." 3 black SUVs appeared on the access road. No sirens, no lights, just speed and purpose. I couldn't see inside the warehouse. I could hear the crack of a breached door, voices shouting commands that wind tore apart. A sharp pop, flashbang, more shouting. A second pop. Silence. 7 minutes of silence. The longest 7 minutes of my life. Longer than the 9-hour wait for Seo's meeting. Because this time I was 3 blocks away, and I could hear it happening, and I couldn't do anything but grip the steering wheel and listen. David reached over and took my hand. I held on until my knuckles went white. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Then movement. Figures in tactical gear emerging from the building. Radio chatter crackling from the FBI vehicles. More men coming out. And an ambulance rolling in quiet, no sirens. Scene controlled. My phone. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it. "We have him, Ruiz. He's alive." I pressed the phone against my forehead. The sound that came out of me wasn't a word. Just 5 months of held breath leaving my body in a rush that took everything with it. David put his hand on my shoulder. I could hear him exhale, long, slow, relieved. "Injured," Ruiz continued. "Lacerations on his arms and torso, signs of interrogation, but he's conscious and talking. We're transporting him to a secure medical facility. I'll send you the address." "I'm already in Stamford." "Of course you are. Private medical center, federal security at every entrance." Ruiz met me in the lobby, shorter than I'd expected, sharper eyes than her phone voice suggested. She looked at me like she was trying to solve an equation that kept giving her the wrong answer. "Bridgeport from a license plate, Stamford from a roof color. You're either the most resourceful civilian I've ever worked with, or you missed your calling at Quantico." "Where is he?" She led me down a hallway. White walls, fluorescent lights, the antiseptic smell of every medical facility I'd ever been in. 3rd door on the left. A guard outside who checked my ID, checked my face against whatever photo they had on file, and stepped aside. I pushed the door open. He was sitting on the edge of a hospital bed, shirtless, and for the first time I saw all of it. The tattoos covered everything: chest, ribs, shoulders, back, both arms from shoulder to wrist. Intricate black ink that was both art and architecture, the encoded nervous system of a criminal empire, written on living skin. Patterns that spiraled and interlocked, that looked like decoration to anyone who didn't know better and looked like a map to anyone who did. Bandages on his left side, white gauze spotted with faint red. A stitched cut above his right eyebrow. Bruises across his ribs that were already turning the color of a thunderstorm, deep purple, sickly yellow at the edges. Raw ligature marks on both wrists where rope or zip ties had dug in. They'd hurt him. The evidence was written on his body as clearly as the codes. But his eyes were clear, and when they found mine, every wall on his face collapsed at once. Amara. My name in his mouth, broken, relieved, desperate, undid something I'd been holding together for 7 hours with nothing but willpower and car keys. I crossed the room. He stood slowly, wincing, one hand pressing against the bandaged ribs, 1 foot of space between us. The careful distance, the respectful gap, the space I'd needed for 5 months and he'd never once violated. I closed it. Both hands on his face, jaw, cheeks, pulled him down and kissed him. Not gentle, not careful. The kiss of a woman who spent 7 hours believing she'd lost someone. Hard and desperate, and my tears were on his face, and his hands were in my hair, and he made a sound, low, broken, and kissed me back like I was the first real thing he'd touched in hours. When we pulled apart, forehead to forehead, his hands on my waist, I could feel his heartbeat through bare skin, my palms flat on the tattoos, 5 years of flinching at male touch, and now my hands were pressed against the chest of the most dangerous man I'd ever known, and I felt nothing but safe. They wanted the codes, he said, voice raw. A specialist trained to read the cipher system, photographing and cataloging every pattern. How much did they get? He smiled, thin, exhausted, savage. 40% of the visible patterns, very thorough. The smile sharpened. What they don't know is that I rebuilt the cipher key 18 months ago. First thing I did when I started with the FBI, worked with a federal cryptographer to change the entire encoding system. The tattoos they photographed are real. The key that makes them readable is not the one they think it is. Everything they extracted is noise, dead coordinates, ghost accounts. Even strapped to a chair with a specialist peeling codes off his skin, he'd been 3 steps ahead. I fed them the old key, he said. Slowly, made it look like I was breaking, bought time. Figured the FBI would find me or I'd run out of fake codes. How close were you to running out? 6 hours, maybe less. I'd found him with 7 hours on Ruiz's window, margins that thin. How did they find this place? He asked. David knew the area from Kwon's network, gave me a neighborhood and a roof color. I drove every block until I found it. That expression again, Bridgeport, driveway, the look of a man recalculating who I am. You drove the Port District at night, looking for a Geomun-pa black site. You missed Tuesday, I don't accept that. Then came the hardest fight, not the Geomun-pa, the United States government. Ruiz and a federal prosecutor named Chen laid out 2 options in a conference room at the medical facility. Option 1, witness protection. New name, new city, no contact with anyone from his current life. Option 2, remain as he was, a target with a kill order from Seoul. Those aren't options, I said. Me, Ruiz, Chen, Yi-sun in a wheelchair the doctors insisted on. They're 2 different ways of ending the same life. Ms. Johnson, witness protection has successfully. Third option, full cooperation, not just testimony, everything, every code on his body, every account, coordinate, cipher, complete transfer of the Geomun-pa's American financial architecture to federal custody. Yi-sun decrypts it personally with your cryptographers. In exchange, immunity and protected residency. Real name, real location, federal security detail, not a vanishing act. A life. Chen shook his head. That's unprecedented. No federal prosecutor in the history of. Then be the first. He leaned back, looked at Ruiz. Ruiz's face was unreadable. I could feel the deal slipping, that bureaucratic wall going up, the institutional default to safe options and established procedures. Let me tell you what's going to happen if you put him in witness protection, I said. I hadn't planned this part. The words were coming from somewhere deeper than strategy. You'll get his testimony. You'll get a debriefing. You'll get enough to build your case against CEO and maybe a few mid-level Geomun-pa operators. And the rest, the offshore accounts, the encrypted networks, the intelligence that's literally written on his body, you'll lose. Because a man in witness protection is a man with no incentive to cooperate beyond the minimum. But a man with a life, a real life, people he cares about, a place he. My voice broke. Right there in the conference room, in front of a federal prosecutor and an FBI agent, my voice cracked like glass and I had to stop talking for 3 seconds. I pressed my nails into my palm under the table. Breathed, found it again. A place he belongs, I finished. That man will give you everything because he has something to protect. Chen was quiet. I could see him calculating not the legal risk, but whether I was right. Your two biggest operational breaks, Bridgeport and Stamford, came from me, a librarian, and my brother, a construction worker. Your surveillance teams had the Stamford area and couldn't find the building. I found it in 2 hours with a car and Google satellite view. I leaned forward. You need what's on his body. He's the only person alive who can read it, and he's willing to give you everything, but not from a bunker in Nebraska under a name that isn't his. Silence, long enough that I could hear the ventilation system humming. Chen looked at Yi-sun. You'd submit to a full debriefing, every tattoo decoded, every asset identified. Every one, Yi-sun said. I've spent 2 years trying to dismantle this operation from the inside. You're offering me the chance to finish it from the outside. Chen looked at Ruiz. Ruiz looked at me. Something passed between the three of us, not trust exactly, but recognition. The recognition that the person sitting across the table in a cardigan and library name badge had outperformed their field teams twice and wasn't going to stop. I'll take it to the AG's office, Chen said. No promises. It took 3 weeks, 14 meetings, 2 trips to Washington. I went at every single one, sitting in waiting rooms in federal buildings, wearing the nicest clothes I owned, holding a folder of documentation I'd organized myself. David testified about Kwon's network, dates, names, delivery routes, locations he'd absorbed during his years in the margins of that world. I gave a written statement about the party, about Yi Hyun, about the business card. First time I'd put the whole thing on paper in 5 years. My hand cramped halfway through. I kept writing. Yi-sun sat for 9 days of debriefing. 9 days in a windowless room with federal cryptographers, decoding the patterns on his own skin, translating the architecture of an empire into spreadsheets and seizure orders. The deal was approved on a Thursday in April. Chen called me personally. Your librarian made a compelling case, he said. She's not done making cases. American operations dissolved, assets frozen, leadership indicted across 3 states. Seoul lost 47 million. The 40% they'd extracted from Yi-sun's body. Useless. Every code pointed to dead accounts, empty coordinates, ghost infrastructure. They'd spent resources chasing smoke that Yi-sun had blown in their faces while tied to a chair. 2 more men sent. FBI caught both, JFK, Bridgeport Motel. Then Seoul went quiet, not forgiveness, math, nothing left to recover. Yi-sun no longer worth the cost. The first time, I walked into his new apartment. I stood in the doorway and didn't move for a long time. Not because something was wrong, because nothing was. No gate, no cameras, no armed men, no iron bars behind curtains, just a door with a regular lock and a welcome mat he'd bought at Target. The absence of danger was so unfamiliar it felt physical, like stepping out of water you'd been swimming in for so long you'd forgotten you were wet. I walked through the rooms touching things. A coffee mug in the dish rack. A book on the nightstand, Murakami always. A jacket hung over a kitchen chair. Evidence of an ordinary life, assembled piece by a man who'd never had one. And I thought, this is what it looks like when it's over. Not a bang. Not a dramatic final scene. Just a man's jacket on a chair and a mug in a rack and sunlight through a window that doesn't need to be bulletproof. The first time I saw him do something ordinary, I stopped in that same doorway and didn't move for a full minute. He'd moved to a small apartment in Westbrook, 10 minutes from the library. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that barely fit 2 people, bookshelves he was building from hardware store lumber. Nothing like the mansion, nothing like the safe house, just a man in an apartment starting over. And one Saturday afternoon, I walked in and found him on the floor, cross-legged, surrounded by IKEA parts, swearing in Korean at a Swedish instruction manual. There was sawdust in his hair. One of the shelf brackets was upside down. He was holding an Allen wrench like it had personally offended him. I started laughing. The kind that buckles your knees and makes your eyes water. The kind I'd forgotten my body could make before February. He looked up, Allen wrench in his tattooed hand, genuine frustration on his face. This is harder than running a criminal empire. The instructions are in Swedish. I speak 4 languages, none of them Swedish. I walked over, took the wrench from his hand. Our fingers touched during the handoff and neither of us rushed it. His skin was warm. The tattoo on his index finger was right there. Remember what silence costs. I ran my thumb across it without thinking and felt him go still. Move, I said softly. I assembled the shelf in 12 minutes. When I finished, he was leaning against the wall watching me with that expression I'd been collecting since the first time I laughed in February. Warmth, surprise, something like awe, something like a man who keeps discovering new rooms in a house he thought he'd mapped completely. I have never been more attracted to anyone in my life, he said. It's an IKEA shelf, Yi-san. It's not the shelf. I looked at him, sitting on the floor of his small apartment, sawdust in his hair, surrounded by cardboard and plastic bags, the most powerful man I'd ever known reduced to a civilian who couldn't read Swedish furniture instructions. And I felt something that Dr. Osai had a name for, but I didn't. Not yet. I know, I said. It's not the shelf for me either. David works maintenance at a community college, shows up every day, comes home tired in a way that looks healthy instead of haunted. He started therapy, my referral, Dr. Osai's practice. Some nights he comes over and we sit at my kitchen table and don't say anything important, and it feels like the most important thing in the world. Just 2 siblings existing in the same room without a crisis between them. He and Yi-sun have a careful, quiet relationship. 2 men who owe each other things too big to say out loud. David's lead helped save Yi-sun's life. Yi-sun pulled David out of Seo's hands. They don't discuss it. They watch basketball on David's couch sometimes. Yi-sun doesn't fully understand the rules, but he's competitive enough to yell at the screen anyway, and David finds this unreasonably funny. I think that's how some men say what they can't say. Through shared couches and bad ref calls, and the comfortable silence of 2 people who survived the same storm. Dr. Os asked me last week if I was happy. I didn't answer right away. Happy is a word I stopped using at 22. It felt too clean, too simple. A word for people who hadn't woken up on floors, people whose brothers didn't disappear. Happy was a country I'd been deported from, and for 5 years I'd accepted that I'd never go back. I'm not happy, I said. I'm present, I'm choosing, I'm awake. And some mornings I look at him across the kitchen table. He drinks his tea the same way every time, both hands around the mug, looking out the window like he's still not used to having a window that doesn't need bulletproof glass. And I feel something so enormous it scares me. Because the last time I felt something that big, it was pain. This isn't pain, but it fills the same space in my chest, takes up the same room. And sometimes I have to stop and remind myself, this is the good version. This is what it feels like when something matters and nobody is taking it from you. She smiled, second smile in 5 years of sessions. That's what happy feels like when you've been through hell, Amara. It scares you because you know what it costs to lose something real. The fear isn't a sign that something's wrong. It's proof that something's real. Last Tuesday, 2 p.m., Murakami under his arm, tattoos on his hands, scar below the ear, same as always. But he didn't go to the armchair. He came straight to the counter, set the book down, looked at me with those dark eyes that I used to think were cold and now know are just careful. Careful because he grew up in a world where showing warmth got you killed. Careful because he spent 34 years learning to hide every soft thing inside himself. I have something for you, he said. He pulled out a small flat box, set it on the counter between us. I opened it. His library card, the one he'd filled out that first day, the day I froze, the day I ran to the back office, the day everything started. The one with his address in neat handwriting that I'd photographed to stake out his house. He'd had it laminated, and beneath it, on a small white card in his handwriting. This is where I found you, Jay. I stood behind the same counter where I'd stopped breathing 7 months ago, holding a laminated library card, and a handwritten note from a man whose brother destroyed me and who had spent every day since trying to be something his brother never was, and I cried. Not the gasping, ugly, broken kind I'd done for 5 years. The warm kind. The kind that doesn't come from something being taken. The kind that comes from something being given. Helen saw the whole thing from the reference desk. She started clapping. Slowly at first, then louder. The only 2 patrons in the building looked up from their books, confused, then saw my face and smiled. Yi-sun reached across the counter and wiped my tears with his thumb, tattooed, scarred, complicated, and said, "Same time next week. Every week, for as long as you'll have me." He leaned across the counter, and he kissed me, not like the hospital, not desperate, not terrified. Slow, deliberate. The kind of kiss that belongs to 2 people who finally have time, who finally believe the time is theirs. Helen clapped louder. One of the patrons started clapping too. I am not the woman I was 5 years ago. She was broken by a man who used his brother's name like a weapon. I am not the woman I was 7 months ago. She was hiding in a library, surviving, not living. I am someone new, forged between breaking and building, someone who stalked a man she believed was her rapist, discovered the truth, confronted it in the rain, fell in love in a library, called the FBI twice, found a warehouse from a license plate, found a black site from a roof color, talked a federal prosecutor into something unprecedented, and refused, every time the world said sit down, to be anyone's passenger. My name is Amara, 27, librarian, in love with a man whose body maps an empire that no longer exists, whose hands hold mine like I'm the steadiest thing he's ever known. Not a fairy tale. 2 people on opposite sides of the worst story either ever lived, choosing, every Tuesday at 2 p.m., to build something better. His hand over mine, my hand over his heartbeat. That's not a fairy tale, that's a Tuesday. And it's everything.